Many of us live under the quiet weight of someday syndrome. We convince ourselves that our current existence is merely a waiting room, and that our real life will only begin once we reach a specific future milestone, a promotion, a move, or a perfect relationship. Curious, empathetic, Italian author Dino Buzzati funneled this specific anxiety into his 1940 novel, The Tartar Steppe. For Buzzati, the story was a direct reflection of a growing internal dread, the fear of his own wasted potential. While working the night shift at a Milan newspaper, Buzzati watched his older colleagues drift toward retirement. He realized that if he remained passive, he would grind away his youth in the same cycle of safe, monotonous repetition. Buzzati transposed this modern office dread into a surreal military world. He wanted to demonstrate how easily the human mind can surrender an active life in exchange for a state of perpetual passive waiting. The novel follows Giovanni Drogo, a young, newly commissioned lieutenant. He arrives at his first posting brimming with the specific kind of ambition that expects glory to arrive as a matter of course. Instead, he finds Fort Bastiani, a decaying, isolated outpost perched on a dead frontier. Beyond the walls lies a massive, arid desert where no enemy has been seen for generations. Drogo recognizes the futility of the assignment within hours. He immediately makes a firm vow to request a transfer back to the city after just 4 months of mandatory service. Drogo is entirely certain he will leave. Yet, through a series of subtle psychological shifts, those 4 months will stretch into a 30-year prison sentence spent in the exact same spot. Drogo's stagnation begins with routine. The fort operates on a strict cycle of guard shifts, parades, and password checks. This rigid structure replaces freedom with passive obedience. It is entirely literal. When a soldier fails to utter the daily password, his comrades shoot him. Buzzati wrote these scenes while living in 1930s fascist Italy, a society that championed total conformity. The absurdity of the fort's rules anchors the story in the real-world authoritarianism of the era. Fort Bastiani functions as a site of psychological conditioning. By demanding total adherence to arbitrary rules, the institution teaches men that surrendering their freedom is far less taxing than the work of living an independent life. To survive the boredom, the soldiers construct a collective fiction. They cling to the legend that a mythical horde of Tartars lives beyond a desert, convincing themselves that a massive invasion is always just over the horizon. This shared delusion grants their meaningless routine a sense of purpose. By obsessing over a future battle that never comes, the soldiers effectively paralyze their present lives. Drogo eventually takes a leave of absence to the city, only to discover he has become completely alienated. His friends have families, his mother has grown old, and he no longer speaks the language of civilian life. Intimidated by the messy, unstructured movement of the outside world, Drogo retreats to the fort. He chooses the familiar safety of his barracks over the difficult work of rebuilding a life. Drogo succumbs to the sunk cost fallacy. He has invested so many years waiting for the Tartars that leaving now would require him to admit his youth was wasted. For Drogo, the fear of unstructured freedom is far more terrifying than the misery of a familiar routine. 3 decades pass in this state of suspended animation. Drogo is now 54 years old, bedridden, and his health is shattered. Then the impossible happens. Dust rises on the northern horizon as the Northern Army launches an actual attack on the frontier. The fort mobilizes for the combat Drogo has spent his entire life anticipating, but the military bureaucracy values only efficiency. Because he is sick and immobile, Drogo is unceremoniously dismissed and evacuated on a stretcher to make room for healthy reinforcements. Drogo sacrificed his youth and his autonomy to a system that simply discards him at the moment of crisis. He waited 30 years for a battle that the regulations ultimately forbid him from fighting. The carriage taking him home leaves him at a roadside inn. Drogo is left to die alone, far from the battlefield, and stripped of his lifelong military delusions. As the shadows stretch across the room, Drogo finally identifies the real adversary he has spent 30 years anticipating. The army on the steppe was a ghost, The final, inevitable opponent has always been death itself. Recognizing this, the lifelong dread lifts. He straightens his collar, smiles into the dark, and faces his end with the solitary bravery he had always dreamed of showing in combat. Buzzati leaves us with a stark warning. If we spend our days waiting for the perfect future moment to begin living, we forfeit our lives. The routine itself is the life, and our only true battle is how bravely we inhabit the present moment.